Oh, back to school, to prove to Dad that I'm not a fool. I got my lunch packed up, my boots tied tight. I hope I don't get in a fight. Oh, back to school, back to school, back to school. Well, here goes nothing.
DNA, you're in my heart. DNA, in fact, you're in every part of my body. Each cell has a nucleus, each nucleus has chromosomes. And DNA, baby, that spells DNA.
Welcome back. This is Lesson 7 in our Bible study series, Does God Exist? And it's also Part 3 of the DNA portion. Last week we looked at the great improbability of DNA evolving through chance, natural selection, or self-organization. And this week we look at the complexity of the information, including a look at why junk DNA is no longer considered junk.
I had a burning question. The question was this: could this idea of intelligence or intelligent design be made into a rigorous scientific argument? Is it just an intuition that we have? Is it just something we are inferring because, well, we can't think of anything better? Or is there a rigorous scientific basis for what you might call the design hypothesis, the idea that a conscious, rational intelligence is responsible for some of the features of life that look so designed, like, in particular, the digital code in DNA?
Intelligence in nature. What two components are needed to assume design?
Information.
Okay, information.
Function.
Oh, okay. All right, or pattern of the information. Not just that it's there, but it actually serves a function, it does something. Yeah, those are the two things. So the other question is, what is meant by intelligence in nature?
That's something that we already, that we're actually made of, and other stuff around us is made of, is functioning and has information in it, which means that it was created by intelligence.
Charles Darwin, he had a mentor, and his mentor was Charles Lyell. And it was from Lyell that Darwin learned the method of investigating the remote past. I was reading Lyell, and one day I came across something that helped me answer this question: what makes an explanation best? Because Lyell had an answer to that. Principles of geology being an attempt to explain the former changes of the Earth's surface by reference, and this is the phrase that knocked my socks off, by reference to causes now in operation. Here's the principle. If you're trying to explain an event in the remote past, you don't invoke some exotic cause, the effects of which you've never seen. You invoke a cause which is known to produce the effect in question. Now, let's apply it to DNA. Let's apply it to digital code. See if you have the same experience I did. The light went on for me. What is the cause now in operation for the production of digital code?
Intelligent design.
Intelligence.
Wait.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
You can't believe you fell for that.
You're in nature, you're a biological being, you're intelligent, we hope. I mean, that's we're going off of that premise. That's a hypothesis, and it might be proven false, but you never know. Intelligence in nature. I just think it's really interesting is when he talks about intelligent design as a hypothesis for these things, is that it goes to the conclusion of the mind, and we really haven't defined intelligence in mind well. I mean, that's been the whole thing ever since I think, therefore I am. Existence and thinking go together. Well, we can't define either one of them. We can't say this is what it means to be existing and this is what it means to be thinking, because we just can't grasp it. We know what it looks like, but it's really hard to define. And so I think it's interesting as a scientist, that would be very frustrating to get to the point of, well, your mind makes it up. Like, well, how did your mind make it up? I don't know.
Information we know from experience always comes from an intelligent source. It is habitually associated with conscious activity, and we know further of no other cause that produces information. Let's look at one more just observation about information and DNA. This is from Bill Gates. Gates says that human DNA is like a computer program, but far more advanced than any we've ever created. Now that's a highly suggestive observation. Why? Well, because we know something about what it takes to produce computer programs. Computer programs are, after all, types of information with zeros and ones rather than A's, C's, G's, and T's or our alphabet. But what do we know about the origin of computer programs? Well, tornadoes produce them? No. Wind and erosion? Natural selection and random variation? No chance.
Evolution by natural selection is the only theory that has ever been suggested that is capable of generating the illusion of design which we see in the living world.
Let's just run a few examples. Newspaper headlines. We've got ink on paper. Is there chemistry involved? Sure. But is the chemistry responsible for the information in the headline? Well, if you trace it all the way back to its source, it probably comes to some headline writer sitting at a keyboard, right? And you go all the way back. It's not in the fingers. It's back to the mind of that writer.
150 years after the origin of species, the evidence for evolution is so strong that in order not to believe in evolution, you must either be ignorant, stupid, or insane.
Shampoo is better. I go on first and clean the hair. Conditioner is better. I leave the hair silky and smooth. Oh, really, fool? Really? Stop looking at me, Swan.
Okay, next one. What is junk DNA and why is it not really junk?
It's just stuff that doesn't immediately serve a function, but it's information.
Right.
And it's not really junk because like they figured out that it tells tells the functional DNA what to do, basically.
Yeah.
Where to go, how to work.
The cell actually uses quite a complex system of DNA storage and replication. When it actually there are sections of what they thought was junk DNA and a small section of what is actual like usable for proteins, and the cell would actually take certain sections and then splice them together, and using this method it creates patterns within the DNA itself so it can minimize the amount of DNA needed for the information. And using one section of DNA you can create more than one sequence of information because it can be separated and moved around, and that allows it to be more complex yet simpler, more efficient. And I think the junk DNA, that's what's in between, it allows the other information to tell which pieces to put after which piece so that it can create specific important information.
There's sections of the DNA that do not code for building proteins. Much of the DNA does, but there are vast sections that don't. And when this was first discovered, those of a Darwinian mindset said, aha, that is the missing so-called junk DNA we've been looking for. Because on their model, they thought that information arises through this kind of trial and error, natural selection acting on random mutation process. So you have mutations arising. Most of them are no good. They're just junk. They accumulate in the genome. But every once in a while, you get a sequence that's good, that confers a function, that gets preserved. But all the junk gets preserved too. The intelligent design crowd said, we don't think that's the case. We think based on our way of thinking, that there shouldn't be so much useless information in the cell. We think that so-called junk DNA will perform a function. Roll the clock forward, 2007, something called the ENCODE project comes to fruition. Publications start coming out. It's something that's come after the Human Genome Project. Guess what they're finding about the so-called junk DNA?
They perform a function.
It's replete with functions. Many, many important functions. And overall, the non-coding regions of the DNA function like an operating system within a computer that tells the other DNA when to be accessed, when to be expressed, where to be deployed. The similarity between the information processing system inside the cell and the ones that exist in our high-tech world, we realize, is getting closer and closer and closer as we learn more and more about both how to design effective information processing systems and the super effective information processing system inside the cell.
Why didn't you just go home? That's your home! Are you too good for your home? Answer me!
Not really junk. It actually has a purpose. I love his analogy talking about computer structures, and this is a great case in point. If you own a computer and you own an operating system, you guys all do, right? Okay, go into its operating file, take something that doesn't look like you've ever used it before, and trash it. See what happens. It's not good. Don't ever do that. You know, you're looking on your files, you're like, what the heck is this? These exe files and all that? This is garbage. Pitch it. And then your computer doesn't turn on anymore.
Why would you do this to me?
And follow the evidence wherever it leads. And I think based on our uniform and repeated experience of cause and effect, we know of a cause that can explain the origin of the key effect in life, the information, and all those wonderful design patterns and design strategies that the cell employs to process the information. And those are, to me, distinctive hallmarks of intelligent activity. Let's say so, and now let's start looking at life differently as an exquisitely designed system.
Thanks for studying with us again. Remember, if you don't know something or you don't trust what you're being taught in school or in church or anywhere else, then make sure and research for yourself. Please study again with us next week as we finish up our portion on DNA.
You're in my heart. DNA, in fact, you're in every part of my body. Each cell has a nucleus, each nucleus is chromosome. DNA, baby, that spells DNA.
Eat my roast beef sandwich. Willie, did you see that? You have to try and study hard. Because if you want to be a member of the scuba squad, you have to be smart.